let's dance with this. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. So USC, of course, speaking of which, Jess, is a 500 team, but Saturday's game was still close until the end. Here is Marcus Freeman on that.
84 days ago was when we lost Northern Illinois. But, I think somebody had asked me in a press conference earlier in the week, are you worried that your team hasn't been in close games in the past few weeks? And I said no, because the mentality is one play, one life. Like, this play is the only play that matters. And so I had to continue to remind them, have the urgency that we must have, but this is the only play that matters, and we got to execute. And we had some adversity, but they responded. 14-14 at halftime, the way that our guys came out of that locker room and responded, it was the sense of urgency that we didn't have versus Northern Illinois. You go back and you look at the notes that I met with the captains and I took after that game. It was like, hey, we didn't have the sense of urgency to panic almost that, hey, we got to go out and execute. And they did it today.
Interesting. I don't know if you saw the video that Fighting Irish Media put out on social media, like some of the highlights and stuff like that. But coming out of the locker room, Freeman turned, and I think it was one of the offensive linemen or a couple of linemen might have been there, and he said, we've got to have the sense of urgency this second half that we didn't have against Northern Illinois. He was literally still bringing up Northern Illinois coming out of the locker room at halftime against USC that he kind of referenced right there. My question to you, Jesse, do you think it was a good thing for the Irish to have to win a game like that before they go into the playoffs, considering they haven't played any other close games for so long, basically since Louisville?
I think it was an excellent midterm exam before the final exam of the playoffs. And the reason why I say that is they haven't been really pushed or felt like it's one thing to execute when you're up by 4 touchdowns, right? Because there's no fear. There's no nerve of if I make a mistake or if I don't execute, what the repercussions are going to be, because you're up 28 points. You're like, all right, well, defense is probably going to stop him. We'll get the ball back and we're up 28 points. So what's it matter? But when you're in a game where every possession matters and you're going back and forth, it's like practice reps versus game reps, right? Like, you're actually in the game and it matters. Every play is magnified. And so I think that you have to feel that as a player of, I need to perform in this high leverage situation because this possession could be what determines the game at the end of the day, right? And that's what these playoff games are probably going to be, are close games, at least to start. Notre Dame could pull away or whoever else might pull away towards the end, but I guarantee you every playoff game that Notre Dame plays, it'll be close at halftime to some degree, right? And so these players need to be able to feel like what it means to perform in high leverage situations against other high level athletes, because that's what USC was. They weren't unified as a team like Notre Dame was, but they had just the same amount, maybe less or more talent than on that roster, right? And so at least they're matching up with someone skill to skill and having to perform in a high leverage situation. So I loved it for that reason.
Yeah, and that's why, again, like there's still talent on that USC roster, and the majority of it lies in those skill rooms, in terms of wide receivers and the quarterback. I said this yesterday, and of course Vince didn't like it because he still has, like lemon, mouth.
Well, he couldn't admit that it was going to be a close game like the rest of us.
No, he couldn't admit that it was going to be a close game, which always happens. As I said, always happens when Notre Dame goes out there, and especially when there is something on the line like this. They're going to get a game from USC. And to your point, like, you can't go into the playoffs because all the teams are just naturally going to be better now. And I think that it is ultimately much better for them to have been tested like this to end the season, to get in the playoffs, because you're going to be in tighter games once you get into the playoffs. Now, Andrew kind of flips it around. He says sort of a bad thing because their secondary got exposed a little bit. And I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, it was obviously an issue because they gave up more points than they've given up all season, and a large part of it was that. But look at the rest of the college football playoff field. Do you think that there is a better offensive mind that Notre Dame is going to see in their path through the playoffs than Lincoln Riley? You know, like, you can doubt Lincoln Riley basically as a head coach and a program builder based on what he's done in his 3 years there at USC. But, you know, again, he's got a quarterback, and you and I were talking about this yesterday. There's a reason that he decided it was time to move on from Miller Moss, because, like, the guy that they've got reminds me of the guy that just won the Heisman Trophy a couple of years ago. And I'm sure that he reminds Lincoln Riley a lot of that. And he's, you know, he had a season at UNLV under his belt, and he showed, you know, when they put him in at the end of the season, he could perform. And they had some specific skill players. I just think that they recognized once they hit a couple of those passes to get that touchdown before halftime against Christian Gray, I think that's when things flipped for Lincoln Riley. And he's like, you know, look, we haven't had a ton of success anywhere else. You know, that's where we need to go now, you know, to try to make some hay in the second half. And even though Christian Gray made some plays, like, he had a pretty solid first half, you know, when you throw out the end of that half with the touchdowns. And obviously he finished things off strong. Yeah, there were some ups and downs in between. Because, again, like, I don't even know that it was Gray getting exposed. There were like specific, you know, size matchups with those back shoulders that they kept throwing at Gray. And some of that was also, and I know that's been brought up on some other shows, you know, like the zone that they were trying to play. And, you know, did he have the safety help? You know, some of those different things. I don't know. What do you think, Jess? Do you think that the secondary got exposed?
No, I don't think the secondary got exposed, but I definitely think it's a good time for that game to happen, because you got 3 weeks to put on the film and button things up. If you're Al Golden, you shake USC's hand and you say, thank you for that, because now you have identified a weakness that I didn't know. And now another team can't do the same thing to us because I'm going to button this thing up, right? And so that's the way I look at it. And, you know, someone said 360 passing yards is gross. Threw the ball 50 times. You're going to get some passing yards when you throw the ball 50 times and your star running back goes out in the first quarter with a concussion, right? So, like, they were going to air that thing out.
The only stat that matters is, did you have more points at the end? Like, I'm not worried about how many rushing yards, you know, or you know, I was going to say NIU, but NIU won that game. But my point is, I'm not worried about how many passing yards that USC ended up with, because ultimately, at the end of the day, Notre Dame made the plays when they need to, and they won by 2 touchdowns.
Right. And so, you know, Christian Gray came out the gate really strong, but I think what changed the game for Lincoln Riley is when they got that touchdown with about 40 seconds left, or in like 40 seconds before halftime, he said, this is going to be a shootout, and I got to score points. How am I going to score points? I'm going to do the same thing I just did that scored me a touchdown in 30 to 40 seconds. And so I don't think it was – I think you could replace Christian Gray with the next man on the list. Their whole intent was, we're finding one person on that defense, and we're just going to keep going and going and going. So they felt that was, you know, the schematically the matchup that gave them the best opportunity to win in a shootout game with Notre Dame, because Notre Dame was not going to not score points. Like, they were moving the ball up and down the field. It's just a matter of, could the defense get a couple stops? And so, you know, you combine a guy who's obviously tremendously talented. He throws the ball 50 times. The running back's out for the game. And, let's not forget that Lincoln Riley is one of the better, if not best, offensive minds in all of college football. Christian Gray was going to give up some points, but he also made some big plays on the flip side of that. And so that is, you know, the fire that Lincoln Riley was playing with. If you keep coming at a guy, you're going to get some, but ultimately Christian Gray had the last laugh because he got the pick 6 that won the game.
Yep. How you like me now? Joseph Barrett asks, where was the pass rush? I mean, it's a fair point, and it obviously plays into USC being able to have that success. I do think that it is, you know, worth noting, USC's only given up 14 sacks all season. You know, like, they've had pretty good pass protection this season. So you would like the pass rush to get home a little bit more, and ultimately it's going to have to get home more. You know, again, like when you spin it forward against better teams in the playoffs and all that, kind of stuff, but I've got the confidence that you were just alluding to, that they can put on the game film now and they can dissect that, and Al Golden will be able to figure some things out, and that won't be such a big issue going forward. Joseph, they're a 6-6 team. They've also played in almost every game that they've played, with the exception of, I think, 2 now because of Notre Dame, has been a 1-possession game, one way or the other. And again, they have talent on the offensive side of the ball. Like USC always has quarterbacks. They always have wide receivers. That was their strength. And as Jesse just said, that's what they played to try to win the game.
That team could have easily been 9-3 this season.
Right.
Easily.
They did beat LSU, regardless of what you think of the guy down there.
Penn State to overtime. Let's not forget that.
Took Penn State to overtime. Yep, exactly right. By the way, people were calling you out for no whiteboard.
We got 3 weeks, today. All right. Why don't you put a little? Maybe I will. I'll go to the board and start a whiteboard thread and see what people would want to see in these next 3 weeks.
As Josh said, all of their losses except Notre Dame were single digits, and that's
games
what I said.
They were all winning.
They had a 48-0 win. Like I said, I think what I said was all but 2 games were 1-possession game. Their 48-0 win over Utah State, and then Notre Dame beating them. Oh, and then Rutgers. They beat Rutgers by more than 1 possession as well. So but even you look at Nebraska and UCLA, both 1-possession wins. They lost to Washington, 1 possession. They lost to Maryland, 1 point. They lost to Penn State in overtime by a field goal. Minnesota, 1 possession. They actually beat Wisconsin. Okay, so I was wrong about that. They some of their wins were by more than a single possession. But Michigan, they lost by a field goal. LSU, they won by a touchdown. So my point is, they're 500, but they've played in a lot of close games because they've got some talent and because they've got, a good offensive mind leading.
Well, and that's the reason why they're not at Notre Dame's level, is they just have an offensive mind. They don't have a guy who's establishing culture, developing men, and that's what makes Marcus Freeman excellent.
Yes. And I think that's one of the many differences between the 2 programs right now. So there's a chance Notre Dame could still end up as the number 5 seed when the final college football playoff rankings are announced next week. Would you rather be the 5 seed, Jesse, or the 6 seed?
Oh, I'd 100% rather be the 5 seed with how this bracket is going to, or how the top 4 seeds are going to shake out, because, likely the top 2 are going to be the SEC and the Big Ten. And then, 3, 4, 5 is going to be a combination of, 3 and 4 is going to be a combination of the ACC Group of 5 or Big 12 champ, right? And so what that means is at the 5 seed, you're probably going to either play the Group of 5 or Big 12 champ, and then you're going to go on and be able to play either the ACC or the Big 12 champ after that, right? So I think that Notre Dame, I like them in 5 or 6 because that means their second round matchup isn't the SEC champ or the Big 10 champ.
Right.
But I would prefer 5 because right now I would much rather play a 12 seed than who I'm projecting Notre Dame would play as the 11 seed right now. Simply put.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I tend to like now it's going to change. I'll be curious to see exactly, who it all is, but I like the 6 seed better simply because you're not going to have to go through the 1 seed. Like you said, you avoid, whether it's the SEC or whoever.
You're looking like long, like round 3 semis.
I'm looking to semifinals, basically.
I got you.
Yeah. Now you're right. As the 6th seed, your first and second round games are theoretically
a little bit
tougher, but ultimately that, to get into the championship game, you don't have to go through the 1 seed. And, again, to what you're talking about, those probably the 2 and the 3s, just based on how things are right now, it's kind of looking like that and I guess it could be, like Texas potentially, but
That's tomorrow's show, right?
yeah, we're going to kind of dig a little bit deeper into what maybe some of the upsets might mean for Notre Dame tomorrow in rapid fire after the mailbag show. But I'll be curious to see what the we're all curious to see what
if the season ended, and this is what I tried to kind of like, Vince asked me this question when you were gone. I think it was in it was last Wednesday's show, the day before Thanksgiving. He said, a lot of people are saying, is it more advantageous just to be the 5 seed rather than win your conference championship? This year, yes, because of how 1 through 4 is shaping up, but that's not the same. Like 1 through 4 isn't going to shape up that way every year. Like there could be an undefeated ACC team and they could be the 1 seed, right? Like they could be 13-0 and naturally be the 1 seed. It just all depends on how 1 through 4 goes. And so if the season ended right here, right now, today, I have Notre Dame matching up with Alabama at 11. And so I preferably would want them to have the 5 seed, but say there's a ton of upsets and that thing gets restructured. Yep. I can't really, answer that question based off of, how it just all depends on how it falls out, right? Like some years it might be advantageous to be the 5. Some years it might not be. It just depends on where those conference champions end up getting ranked 1 through 4. But if the season ended today, I would like Notre Dame to avoid the 6. I'm not scared of the 6, but I just think the 5 would be better.
That makes sense. I can see that. I hadn't really thought about it that way. Like you kind of like what you're saying though, and I think what some other people are saying is you want to avoid Alabama basically because it's Alabama. I don't think that this Alabama is any better than, really, many of the other comparable teams, like whoever it happens to be. I just think that just like if Alabama gets in, it's largely going to be because the name says Alabama. They're going to get in on the reputation that Nick Saban built over 16 or 17 years or whatever it was. Like Kalen DeBoer's Alabama is not Nick Saban's Alabama. There were a lot of guys who left that team after last year, and they're just not as good as that team last year. And that's why they've lost a couple of the games that they've lost and why they deserve to be squarely on the bubble right now. Andrew Kristofic, he posted on the YouTube yesterday, and I know some other people feel this way as well. Do you think that Miami with 2 losses is more deserving than the 3-loss Alabama team?
No, because look at who they lost to, and then they should have lost that game to Cal. That they came back and won and stole in the middle of the night. That game ended at like 1 a.m, right? Like they could very easily. Okay, in their losses, they didn't look great. They can't stop anyone on defense, right? All they do is get into slug matches with people. And I still think there's 2 or 3 other games on their schedule where you're like, they probably could have lost those ones as well. So if the ACC is only getting 2 teams in, if Clemson wins and SMU still gets an at-large. But if SMU wins, they're the only ACC team that's getting in.
Agreed. I don't think that, like you're Miami and
you had every opportunity to do it. It's all on you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I love that Fran Brown. Hey, Dabo, I got you in.
Every time I get to listen to Fran Brown talk, I love it because he is like, that's another guy, short list of guys that I'd be like, I'd love to play for you. Like he just seems like one of those guys.
I think I called John Andrew earlier. Obviously,
John, you're the same guy who thinks Army should be in the playoff. No offense, I love you, but neither of those teams should be in.
Yeah, I don't agree. I agree with that. I don't agree with John. Sorry. So here's Marcus Freeman on Riley Leonard.
Special, man. He is from the beginning, from the time he got here. I've known he's special, and what he had to learn is how to handle the highs and the lows of what being the quarterback at Notre Dame entails. And you hear me say it all the time. It's no different between the head coach and the quarterback at Notre Dame, and he experienced the highs and the lows within the first 2 weeks of the season, and he continued to battle. He continued to prepare, and I knew from the beginning he was the right quarterback to lead this program.
Fill in the blank, Jesse. Riley Leonard is blank.
Riley Leonard is the perfect quarterback for Notre Dame. And I just, when you look at what they needed and what they were bringing in, right? Like they were bringing in Mike Denbrock. What does he need? A dual threat quarterback. Wide receiver room, little bit shaky, a lot of in and out. Brought in a new wide receiver coach. You don't really have a solid passing game to tip your hat on these last few years. What do you have? You have at least two stud running backs. You have a great defense. So what does that mean? Riley Leonard can be that dual threat quarterback to complement your running backs and make passes when you need to, and then fall back on your defense. So for what this season was cooking up to be, kind of bringing in a new wide receiver coach, bringing in a new offensive coordinator, needing a dual threat quarterback, I think Riley Leonard was the perfect fit for Notre Dame.
I completely agree. I mean, the guy Notre Dame needed to make things go this season. When you look at 30 total touchdowns and 5 interceptions, that's an impressive ratio that he's got. I mean, it's the second quarterback in a row that they've gone out and got from the transfer portal who's basically become a poster child for Notre Dame. And, like we heard the praise that Riley Leonard had for Marcus Freeman earlier, and there you hear the praise that Marcus Freeman has for Riley Leonard. And I think that Freeman said last week, like, he's the kind of guy that you would want your kid to grow up to be, and that kind of stuff. And it's just like great personality, great leadership, great toughness, just the total package. He is absolutely the guy that Notre Dame needed to lead this offense. And Can
I just interject here? Do you remember after that NIU loss and everyone was burning the boat? Give me Angeli. Riley Leonard can't throw the ball. We're not going to win games. Is Marcus Freeman the head coach? And now what are we doing on this show? We're talking about contract extensions and how great
Riley Leonard is.
So I want all of you to appreciate the full circle and the ledge I tried to talk you off of after week 2. And that ends.
I think your microphone actually picked you up less when you held it up close to your mouth. Joseph, at this point, you're living in the past, man. Like, Joseph is still talking about, the topic from 10 minutes ago. We get it. You think USC is inferior. I mean, they are inferior. They're a 6-6 team. You're absolutely right. He says UCLA's defense performed better against SC. Yeah, but UCLA also scored, like Notre Dame scored 4 times more points against SC.
I mean, let's still go down the list of it's a home game for USC. It's a rivalry game.
Like, you can't look at all the stuff that happened in these rivalry games around the country.
Michigan beat Ohio State.
Yeah. Would you rather?
And that's all I could think about after that game was these are identical teams. Michigan was a 6-5 team. I was like, this is going to be Notre Dame in 3 hours.
Would you rather be Ohio State and lose to Michigan at home, or would you rather be Notre Dame and give up a few extra freaking passing yards and a few more points and beat your biggest rival on the road to get into the playoff at the end of the season? I'll take the yards. I'll eat the yards if I'm in the playoff. I'm sorry.
And it was also a noon kickoff after playing on the East Coast the previous weekend. You went coast to coast and had to play a noon kickoff in California. That's 9 a.m. Or sorry, I got my time zones backwards, but you know what I mean.
Sort of. Joe says, wouldn't we rather have Alabama and South Bend than at a neutral site? Absolutely. I mean, and that's actually a good point as well. Again, like if you're the 6th seed and you're going to host number 11 Alabama in December, I mean, sign me up for that, right? Sign me up for any team from the South.
I'm just scared of USC because I think Notre Dame is better in all facets, but look what happened with USC. When you get all that talent on the field, all those stars on the field, it's any given Saturday. Anything can happen, right? And so in terms of probability, Alabama's probability to win compared to these other teams is probably slightly higher because their athleticism and their 5 stars can bridge the gap on any given day. That's the only thing I'd be worried about.
Preach it, Josh. Stats are for losers. That's right. Now, look, we have fun with that again, obviously Al Golden and Marcus Freeman, just like they do every game, are going to go back and they're going to look at that film, and like Christian Gray is going to be in the film room with Mike
Teaching
Mickens.
moments.
Yeah, there's plenty of things. You won the game, as Marcus Freeman has said before. There's still, you can't just look at the result and say, okay, that's good enough. They're still going to go back and they're going to work on a lot of things that need to be addressed as they go forward. So,
and that's okay.
We're good. Offensive line. Got some Marcus Freeman talking about the offensive line here.
Before the game, the challenge was we have to win this game at the line of scrimmage. We have to win this game up front and recognize some of the different pressures that they bring defensively. And I thought our offensive linemen did a great job at recognizing and really communicating and executing. Like, they played a physical affair up front. And they kept coming off the field saying, keep running, coach, keep running. And that's a confident group that played extremely well today.
I like to hear that. Keep running it.
Fill in the blank, Jesse. Notre Dame's offensive line is blank.
Notre Dame's offensive line is resilient. And the reason why I say they're resilient is I don't think they're the best at anything that they do, but they find a way to be physical, tough, and strong every game. They find a way to get the job done at the end of the day. And so to me, that's a tremendous amount of resiliency. And then you factor in all the injuries and, different combinations and permutations that they had between who's starting here, who's starting there. And then Billy Strouth comes back, and then Rocco Spindler's in, and Pat Coogan's in, and you're starting a true freshman at left tackle. Throughout the entire season, they could have found every reason to make an excuse and say, oh, well, we have X, Y, and Z for, why we're not maybe doing as well as we should. Never was that the case. They've always been resilient. They put their head down and they've worked hard, and they've gotten better and better and better every week. And now they're considered one of the best offensive lines in the country.
I mean, we got some good responses here. Stymie says stabilized. I think that is a good one. Fred G. Sanford says maturing. I think that is a good one as well. And then, speaking of things that were not being said 6 weeks ago, Stephen Bright says Knapp is a beast. I mean, look at how this whole thing has turned over the course of the season. And, I still don't think it's a coincidence that Knapp's play, the experience that he has gained obviously meant something. But when Billy Strouth, not Schruth, started playing next to him at left guard, I think that you started to see Knapp's game take off over there as well. I think having that experience and considerable talent next to him really helped. And I mean, again, the guy who is the most unsung in this whole unit still feels like Emil Wagner, who's been one of the most consistent guys from start to finish this season. And again, very easy to forget that he's a first-time starter himself. And then you lose a guy like Ashton Craig, who is playing so well. And Antoine says dominating future. Now, I just think that they are suddenly underrated. When you look at this group, that they're running the ball for almost 225 yards per game through 12 games, 225 yards a game. That is a considerable amount of yards that they've run for, especially when you don't have one just dominating guy. But, between Leonard and Love, they're over 1,700, right at 1,700 yards themselves, and they're averaging 6.3 per carry. And I know Brian tweeted about this the other day. Love and Price are both averaging over 7 yards per carry. Now, some of that is themselves and their, explosiveness, but at the same time, this line has really come together. And like I said, I feel like it is really underrated right now for what this team has ultimately become. There were some growing pains along the way. We all saw it. A lot of that had to do with the fact that you had some number 2 guys in there who had to find their way together, and some inexperienced guys who had to find their way together, but it's really playing well. And I think that it's vastly underrated right now.
I think DK's chat is the most relevant thing that's been said this entire show.
I think he's right. He says this chat is all over the place. You have the Debbie Downers, then the Sunshine Pumpers. Where does DK fall into that? Is he somewhere in the middle?
I think it's relative of the topic. We all know where Vince would be.
Yes. DK's just here to bring the truth.
He's just here for vibes.
Yep, that's right. See, Steven, we got praise. We got praise for Joe Rudolph now. I mean, it's just all swung 180s on these guys. Do you buy or sell the all-white uniform look the Irish wore against USC?
Buy it. But I will say, when I saw that was what was happening, I was like, man, if
I was worried.
This game, it's going to be Clemson 2.0
all over
again. But me personally, there's nothing. You know this. My favorite uniform of all time is those Shamrock Series ones that they wore in Dallas that we were at, those all white with the green and gold. Even in high school, in my more slender days, I liked the all white. I could pull off the all white. There's just nothing. You got white uniform, white pants, white socks, white ankle spats. Like, there's just nothing more icy and clean than all white. And then me personally, as a linebacker at the end of the game, it was like a trophy seeing how dirty I could get my uniform, how many tackles I could make wearing that white uniform. So it's cool because at the beginning of the game, you look all clean and fresh. And at the end of the game, you get to see the labor of your hard work with your jersey all beat up and dirty. So it's 100% buy. They're 10 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I liked them, but like you, the first thing I thought about was, wow, they're doing this against USC.
With everything on the line.
Everything is on the line. And the first thing that I thought about was what happened at Clemson, the only time they've ever worn them before. I didn't think that they would pull them out again. I was shocked that they went with that look. Personally, I do. I like the all white better than the white with the gold pants myself.
Same. I think it lets the rest of the gold really pop more too, especially the helmets.
Yeah. I agree with Joe though. Green numbers. I think that Notre Dame with their whites, their road uniforms, I think that they should just switch it up and go to green numbers on their white road jerseys. I think that would be a nice way to kind of implement some of the green in there more regularly. Would be just to throw the green numbers on there and go with that. And we had a pretty, at least the responses that we got in the chat were more toward sell, more people against the all white. But I generally thought it was a pretty good look.
Let me ask you this. Maybe, I don't know if you're saving this later. I hope not. But what would be your combo for the home playoff game?
I was saving that. That was actually. Right.
Then we're saving it. You don't have to answer that question.
Okay. Do you buy or sell that Ryan Day should be fired if Ohio State doesn't win it all after the loss to Michigan?
Win it all? No, and I kind of let this go in our prior conversation, so I apologize. But I think he has to win at minimum 2 games to be safe. I don't think he has to win it all, but I don't think he can make a first-round exit, and I don't think he can make a second-round exit. I think he's got to win 2 playoff games to be safe.
Again, we've got a pretty good split here. John sells it. Jacoy says he should have been fired yesterday. What makes this tough, like I said, was at least the last 3 losses to Michigan were explainable because you were both elite teams, top 5 type teams going up against each other. And he had beaten Jim Harbaugh, pretty soundly. And what would that be? 2 times, 3 times that they had played against him, but there's no excuse for this one. I think I sell it. I don't think that you can, even though it is a bitter rivalry and they don't even like to say each other's names and it's like the team up north and, all that different stuff. I don't think that you can fire a coach just because he lost a game like that. At the end of the day, his only regular season losses are still to either Michigan or Oregon. That's it.
Yeah, dude wins just about every other game but Michigan.
Yeah. Like, ask James Franklin how things have turned out against Ohio State. Like Penn State is not in Ryan Day's head. So I sell it. I agree with what you're saying. He probably does need to win a couple of playoff games to feel pretty comfortable, because this is a team that's been, ranked 1 or 2 for the entirety of the season. It's obviously a lot tougher when you lose to an unranked team, even when they are a rival. But again, going back to that Notre Dame USC stuff, things could be a lot worse if you're Notre Dame than giving up a few yards at the end of the season. Fill in the blank. Jameis Winston, 4 touchdown passes, 497 yards, 3 interceptions, including 2 returned for touchdowns. For the Browns, they lose 41-32 to the Broncos. That's blank.
That's vintage Jameis Winston. You go look up Jameis Winston in the dictionary. It says 350 passing yards, 2 horrible interceptions that cost you the game, and a couple passing touchdowns. And I liked listening to the game last night with Troy and Joe. Haven't done that in a while because the Manning cast took the night off, I believe. But at one point, Troy goes, Jameis, he's that old school gunslinger, baby. And I was like, man, you're not wrong. And to really spin this in the direction that everyone's going to love, I was like, just think if this was Dak, though. Everyone would be on his head if this was Dak Prescott, right? Like when he threw that first pick six, Troy was like, oh, I see what he was looking for there. And, the wide receivers probably got to come back to the ball and make a better effort. And it's like, that's Dak. Everyone's just like, oh, I threw a pick six. What is he doing? Dak's the worst ever, right? So it's like, at the end of the day, Jameis Winston's a gunslinger, right? He might put up 400 yards, but there's a chance he's going to put up some interceptions. And, it's just like that season he had in Tampa Bay, right? Like he had like 20 some passing touchdowns, but he had like 20 some interceptions to go along with it. It's just the nature of who Jameis Winston is. But at the end of the day, the Browns are more exciting to watch, and they have a better shot at winning with Jameis Winston at quarterback. So I can't really complain. He's making do with the situation.
I mean, he is like the ultimate, are you not entertained? Because when you watch a game that Jameis Winston is playing in, one, you're going to get some, great quote, up front, like we've got from him. I'm just so blessed, and I'm here to play football, and I don't care what the weather is like. And yeah, that's exactly right. And then you get a game like, look at Jameis Winston's career. The man has 152 touchdown passes. He has 106 interceptions. Honestly, I thought that it would have been more than that. But that's been him, man. He is the riverboat gambler. He is out there slinging it. Yeah, I think he became the first quarterback a few years back to throw 30 interceptions in a season. Yeah. A 30-30 man, not the 30-30 that you
needs a 30 for 30 on that 30 for 30 season.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I mean, if nothing else, it's entertaining. But the Browns do play better. They didn't win, but they played better with basically anybody other named Deshaun Watson,
Joe Flacco, Jameis Winston. I mean, who else could come off the couch and be a better quarterback for the Browns?
That's right.
I just appreciate Jameis Winston's outlook on everything that he does.
I do too.
You'll never find him in a bad mood.
Yep. Somebody was asking how many games Jim Harbaugh lost to Ohio State. He lost his first 5 times to Ohio State before he finally broke through and won those 3, the last 3, before heading off to the NFL. And
I gotta give
Harbaugh was in a blender as well there for a while, right?
He was.
Because he was getting shellacked too. Like he was losing some of those games pretty bad.
He had a rough awakening. And I have to say, I appreciate, we have some Archer and there's a Bucknuts guy in the chat. Well, obviously Ohio State fans. I appreciate you guys. You guys can show up, have a conversation. Doesn't have to get crazy. I guess I'm just like overall intrigued though. Like what has you tuning in as an Ohio State fan? What has you up and up in the Notre Dame chats? Like is it Marcus Freeman? Is it the possibility of maybe meeting up in the playoffs? Or are you just genuinely like a fan of both teams?
We had some in here last night too. We had some Bucknuts guys in here. At least there was one specific one, and I don't say that.
And I appreciated the guy, Roger Dodger, USC guy. He was in the show all last week. Another great example. No one who's just in here just trying to start conversation, talk crap and get under people's skins. You're just genuinely here as fans to, contribute to see what's going on, what the up and up is.
Yep. Appreciate you being here. Always appreciated, no matter who you root for. Hopefully, especially, like when we get into rapid fire, we talk about some other stuff. Hopefully we can keep you entertained and have a little fun with us along the way. Appreciate all the very spirited input that we got from the chat.
Love it
tonight.
Another long show tonight. You're welcome. 2 back-to-back days having some great content out here.
We're going some great stuff. So tomorrow, of course, is a mailbag day, but we'll be able to discuss what happens tonight. I know Brian will have a show later tonight, with the college football rankings, the latest ones coming out. But tomorrow, what Jesse and I are going to do is we're going to look at these conference championship games, since we'll have the rankings coming out tonight, and we'll say, okay, how does this impact Notre Dame? Like what happens in the SEC championship game, like if Texas wins that game, what happens in the Big 12 if Iowa State knocks off Arizona State, or, like those, what happens in the Mountain West if UNLV knocks off Boise State, those kind of things. We will look at, sort of how those results can still impact Notre Dame's seeding one way or another. So, Zeddy Onyx says anything for National Signing Day. I'm sure Brian's show earlier in the day will focus on that. We're still not, the recruiting guys. We might touch on some recruiting stuff. Marcus Freeman does have a press conference for tomorrow, so we'll be dialed into that. And, we might have some, like some Marcus Freeman, some of his comments from his signing day press conference and that kind of stuff. But other than that, like I said, Brian on his show, I'm sure will go a lot deeper into that. So, all right. Well, that's going to do it. Thanks again for being here. Hit that like button before you leave, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.